Book 1, Chapter 7, Returning to the Castle. The 6 riders rode towards the castle along the same path from which Nuvatian had barely escaped with his life the night before. As they travelled down the road they led from the city to the castle, they could see the slain riders lying in the mud. One lay on his back, his decomposing face frozen in the terrors of death. Nimri and Cozbi got their first look at the reality of the curse. It stunned them to face the truth. Tales came right out of the pages of the parchments, but some had written the curse off as fable. Now they knew. Why do some men say that it is only fable? The curse, I mean, Cozbi asked, staring at the corpses, perforated faces, and skeletal hands. Because the truth is too fearful for some to accept, Windsor answered. Just overhead in the sky, vultures had gathered. They circled the corpse, not caring that the souls were cursed. It was their flesh they wanted. Upon reaching the castle, the riders were quickly led through the large iron-clad gates by 2 squires who immediately recognized them. King Chess entered the room, his royal garb much less flamboyant than many kings. Riders of Quedar are on the outskirts of Sayre. I brushed swords with them last night, Nuvatian explained. Riders of Quedar in Sayre? That is very bold. That is correct, sire, explained Nuvatian. Darvan is already on to the soul. We don't need any of this information spreading throughout the community, because it will cause widespread panic. Gilmanza, we need to put some knights on the watchtowers, and we need all the knights on duty. However, do not mention the purpose of the watch. No one outside of those who already have knowledge of this should know. It will only cause the quest for that sword to be perpetuated. Find the sword and then bring it here. We will then get into the hands of the immortal king. The king repeated his instructions from the night before. You know the power it gives to the one who possesses it, and you know the power it has to possess you, turning even good men into tyrannical rulers. The king only added the comment for the benefit of the younger knights who had little knowledge and no experience with the sword. They weren't dancing around fairy tales anymore. Shouldn't the possessor be killed, Cozbi asked. No, by no means, the king admonished. He might have come across it accidentally and not know what to do with it. He might not be a threat yet. If the sword can be taken without harming anyone, then that is what must be done. But anyone who possesses the sword is treacherous, began Cozbi, before being cut off by the sharp eye of Windsor. I hope that age gives you wisdom and retards your hastening to rash judgments, the old prophet said. But he has already killed 2 men, explained Cozbi. Yes, but it was Randolph and Pete, who have a history of trouble. The possessor of the sword might have merely defended himself, Gilmanza said. Navi listened, his feet propped up on the king's table and his hat tilted, shadowing his face. I suppose, then, that if you end up with it momentarily, he said to Cozbi, I should do the right thing and shoot an arrow through you, even if you haven't succumbed to its tempting vices. Well, of course not, Cozbi cried. But I thought it held powers to corrupt even the noblest of men. Yes, it does, but that doesn't mean that its powers cannot be withstood, explained Gilmanza. Nor does it mean that anyone cannot be forgiven for a momentary lapse with the curse, said Windsor, shifting a little uncomfortably in his seat. Besides, for some it corrupts almost immediately because they are already tainted with a lust for power. Others are more slowly corrupted because deep down they want to do what is right, Navi explained. Bearing the sword doesn't make one evil. Succumbing to its devices makes one evil. Rushing to judgment only brings swift judgment upon yourself, scamp. The 7 men walked along the long and decorated corridor of the castle to the spiral staircase. They stood in front of a large pane window making soft conversations. An octagonal window framed the view of the princess outside. She stood beneath a large oak tree, brushing one of her horses. As the men paused on the stairwell discussing the pulse of the kingdom, Nuvatian was apprehended by the view outside. The princess's fine equestrian clothing complemented her outgoing personality. He watched her as she brushed her horse, her untamed hair blowing in the wind. The king, having thought things through, issued his orders. We will put about 30 extra knights on duty guarding the castle and the rest of the city. You know, if they were that close to the castle, perhaps the person with the sword lives nearby. Make a list of all who live within the area where you first saw the riders, he concluded. He then noticed Nuvatian staring out the window. Nuvatian, he said sharply, hoping to get his attention. Hearing his name, Nuvatian snapped back to the task at hand. Excuse me, my lord, what did you say? I was saying that perhaps the riders were too close to the castle because they were scouting out the one with the sword. Perhaps he lives nearby. Therefore, I suggest that you investigate the area where they were spotted. Certainly, Nuvatian agreed, trying to look at the king instead of the sublime view outside. I will get right on it, my lord, he assured. We will not rest until the sword of Darvan is found. Taking leave, Nuvatian retreated down the stairs. I don't know why people insist on building homes outside of the city walls anyway, fumed the king. City life is trifling, Windsor noted. They know they can have more land outside the walls of the city. Windsor's response came with a definitive answer since he lived outside the city walls himself. Besides, he continued, you're not within the walls of the city yourself. Yes, but I sit on a mountain overlooking the city with iron gates and a wall around me. That's much different than being open prey in the spacious land. You are safe because it's there after all. But I will say, whoever of my ancestors built the castle outside the city ought to be shot. A king ought to be in the middle of the people, not on a hill outside of the city. The king, Gilmanza, Windsor, and Navi stood looking out the window when Nuvatian's gaze had been. I think he is struck by the beauty of your daughter, Gilmanza said with a chuckle. But who isn't? Navi rubbed his scruffy chin, checking her out himself. Yes, I think you're right. Well, he is a fine man, and a man with good taste in women, I must say. And if she is my daughter, King Chess said, laughing and rubbing his brown stubbly beard. However, perhaps that is a greater task before him than the sword of Darvan. Why do you say that? Asked Windsor. Well, that daughter of mine is of a deep independent spirit. I guess I'm partially to blame for that. When her mother died, some of the palace staff suggested that I send her off to be properly raised by women. I was not about to do that. She was, after all I had. But I didn't know what to do with a girl. I did the best I could, but I suppose I raised her more like a boy. I taught her what I know, the sword, the bow, martial arts, fishing, riding horses, and all the politics of the kingdom. I even taught her how to craft a sword. She can craft a finer sword than anyone I know. Well, except for you, Gilmanza. Thank God that some women stepped in and taught her the things that I couldn't. Girl things, like how to dress like a lady. Why, that girl is so independent she cleans the hoofs of her horses, refusing to let the stable keepers do it. I made her do that as a child because I wanted her to learn responsibility and not think that she's too good for simple tasks, explained the king. She's a strong woman, a bit temperamental. She keeps her heart guarded. He sighed, examining the situation. He has his hands full if he thinks he's going to win her over. He's in for a real bullfight. Well, I think you did an exceptional job raising her, Windsor said, patting the king on the shoulder. I hope so, the king said, smiling. I sure do hope so. She can speak more languages than I can, added the king, glancing out the window at his daughter. But I never taught her about love. Now, I would be glad to volunteer my services and teach your daughter all about romantic love, my lord, Navi said, bearing a grin. Nothing before he spoke, the king turned towards Navi with his hand on his sword and said levelly, "If you so much as touch my daughter, I will cut you into pieces." Navi's eyes grew wide, about to protest the king's insult. "Nothing against you personally, Navi," the king assured him. "You are, after all, a prophet. I just don't want my grandson running around with purple and green braids in his hair. So you can forget about courting my daughter." Navi tousled his colored braids away from his face and laughed, letting the insult roll off of him. "You have taught her about love, the love of a father. Romantic love begins with knowing healthy love, and that is what you have given her," Windsor said, pretending the young prophet had never steered them away from the original conversation. "Romantic love picks up there, and it's not anything that a parent can teach." "You have a point," said the king. "You know, she thinks she's going to ride with you." "Well, let her," Gilmanza said. "Windsor and I will keep a close eye on her, and I'm sure Nuvatian won't take his eye off of her. She might not have the strength of a man, but she has the sharpest archery skills of anyone I know. She has a gift, you know." "Well, I'll be glad to keep my eye on her," murmured Navi. "Do you really think I should let her go?" asked the king, ignoring Navi. "She has a gift, you know," Windsor said, echoing Gilmanza. "Need I remind you that when she was but an infant, I told you she would be a delicate pearl among warriors, and that she would be gifted with the pulling of a string? It is probably best if you send her with your blessing." "Yes, well, I had hoped that meant the strings of a harp." "I also told you that she would be an only child, and would be more precious to you than 10 sons. She would perform the duties to the kingdom more efficiently than any son you would ever have had, or that she would play a key role in the unfolding of major events." The king listened patiently to the voice of the prophet, remembering the words like they were yesterday. "You must not interfere with what is to be, or I fear, my friend, you will be removed from your post," warned Windsor. The alarming words of the seer brought him back to his senses, understanding what the prophet meant. Meanwhile, Nuvatian had walked down to the tree when Nudora was grooming her horse. "You told me to come back when I could ride again," he said, approaching the princess from behind. Looking over her left shoulder, she replied, "Well then, let's ride." He stepped beside her and petted her horse. "Actually, I'm not here to ride." Shifting his focus from the horse to her iridescent eyes, now taking on a brighter color green than he had ever noticed, Nuvatian ran his hand across her wind-blown hair while explaining his presence at the castle. "Last night, riders of Quaidar pursued me." "Warriors from Quaidar? Within Sayir?" Her voice was calm as she adjusted the bow strapped to her back and brushed her hair away from her face. She had finished shooting only moments before. "Not far from the castle," he continued. "I could not tell how many there were. Nudora, I know you are an exceptional skilled archer, but please be careful. I would feel better if you would stay on castle grounds. We are assigning extra nights to the castle to secure the safety of all in the palace while we search for who has the sword of Darwin." "Stay on castle grounds?" She was indignant. "And what makes you think that I will not be among those searching for the sword of Darwin?" "Well, you're a princess, the only heir. Your life must be guarded." "Because I am royalty, I have an even greater responsibility to my country and my people. If I die serving my country, then so be it. I will have done what is right," she said. "But it's not your place to do the work of the knights," Nuvatian argued. "I am a knight." She was steaming mad as she mounted her horse. "I just don't want anything to happen to you," Nuvatian said. "I stand no more chance of being injured than do you. In fact, you stand a better chance of being injured than do I, according to our little match we had the other day," she crowed. "Oh, you really think you beat me?" "I was taking it easy on you because I didn't want to hurt you." "Oh, really? So you let me put that sword to your neck until you grow it, Somehow I have trouble believing that, she snapped. You were wearing full armor, Nuvatian argued. It wouldn't have mattered. Armor and no armor. She took up her reins and spurred her horse. As she kicked her horse into a full run, her father, still looking out the window and talking with Windsor and Gilmanza, murmured, See what I mean? Yes, I see what you mean, laughed Windsor. I don't think you're going to have to worry about her. I think she can handle herself when it comes to men. Yes, it's him I'm worried about, said the king. Windsor laughed. Perhaps she will soften over time. She's just like I was when I was young. Stubborn, said the king, sighing. Then, changing the subject, he offered, Well, what about I teach you three a new board game? Called chess. Well, we don't have anything to do before lunch, do we? Can't think of anything. Let's play, said the king. Angry by what Nadora had said, Nuvatian watched her ride off and then mocked her words in a falsetto voice. You stand a better chance of being injured than do I, according to our little match we had the other day. Princesses. They're always so bloody arrogant, he muttered as he walked away towards the barn to check on his horse's ankle. The next couple of weeks were frustrating as the riders searched throughout the land for the sword. They remained constantly alert, keeping their eyes open for any sign, yet they were silent, not wanting to stir more trouble for the kingdom. All they could do was hope that a sure sign would point them to the possessor of the sword, but no sign came. They could only wonder if the possessor had already joined the Quadarist. They knew that the riders were aware of the sword's presence because they were in the kingdom. The riders were anxious, as was the king, who remained constantly informed. Their search was difficult due to the inconspicuous nature of it. They had to look as though they weren't looking. They kept their focus within the scope of the area mentioned in the meeting hall, but always remaining on alert in and out of the city. After no luck at all, the riders returned to the castle to re-evaluate the situation. It was pouring rain when the riders arrived. They knew that everything hinged on this sword, and on the immortal king fulfilling his mission faithfully. They wondered if they should go ahead and inform him of the presence of the sword. Perhaps the immortals can help them find the sword. Well, why don't we just tell the immortal king that the bloody thing has turned up in our kingdom, and they can come and search for it themselves, suggested Nimri. I don't think he is all that anxious to see the thing, King Chess commented. But if the fate of the world depends on him and the sword, he should be. He has a responsibility, Cozbi objected. Well, we can't get into the land of Shaikadash. No mortal can enter the land of the immortals anymore, let alone see the king, Gilmanza replied. It is our responsibility to find the sword, not the immortals. It is in our kingdom, not theirs, Windsor said. Growing familiar with the sword, Elk practiced his forms. Although they were poorly executed, they were powerful and effective. He had landed a trump card with this find. This sword wasn't dependent upon long hours of training. It made the worst of swordsmen into a master. It was as if the sword itself possessed the ability of a gifted teacher. Elk had never been this good. He was climbing the walls with excitement. In his mind, he visualized himself as king of the mountain. His finest hour was ahead of him. He was on the verge of becoming somebody, someone that history would remember.